Hello, friends. You ever play an Oxygen Not Included and you happen to scroll over to the right on your map for no reason, and then you come into the ice biome and you see a plant here and you say, "Sweet, irritated antelope eyeballs, what is that?" Well, I'll show you. These, my friends, are Wheezeworts. The basics of this is it will draw in some gas, make it colder, and then blow the gas back out. So it's kind of just a self-cooling plant that you can take advantage of if you need some smaller cooling needs. The first thing I'll really say about these is these are good to have if you just leave them in their biomes. This is also something that's good to have for spaced out. So I'm going to kind of break this into two separate parts. So at the very minimum, in the base game, which we'll cover first, if you need to make sure that your ice biome stays cool, these can help. They're not amazing, but it's free. So you can just leave it there, plant it in the ground, and you can take advantage of it. If you do want to get some natural cooling on a different place, you can use some exploits to create natural tiles and have pips plant the seeds for you. I'll talk about that in a later video, but that's something you can do, although there's not too many practical uses for it with this plant. So yeah, bare minimum, even if you were just to find these, unearth them, and then leave them alone, leave them in their biomes so you could keep this ice biome cool, that's great. Keeping this ice biome preserved is very important so that you can keep your natural sleet wheat growing, which is easily one of the most powerful food sources in the game. So yeah, if that's all you do with it, then that's perfect. But I'll show you a couple other things you can do with it. Alright, here's an example of a build in the base game that you could do to cultivate a sleet wheat farm. This would be like if you had destroyed your ice biome for some reason, or you don't have enough sleet wheat, or you have a huge colony population or something like that. As long as you have the dirt and water to push this, this is totally viable. The one thing, though, if you start to plant these in your own tiles, they will be 4 times as powerful as the natural ones, but they will start requiring phosphorite. The good thing about phosphorite, though, is at least in the base game, it is extremely plentiful. So on this map, this is taken from later stages of the game in the base game on my walkthrough, and this is how much phosphorite I have just sitting around. So if you wanted to make use of that and just make a quick cooling setup that takes virtually no power, this is a good way to do it. I'm also still feeding these warmer water because it gets cooled down enough by the Wheezeworts to let this sleet wheat grow inside these tiles. So this is an okay option, I would say. It's not something I'd usually go for, only because the ice biomes, at least in the base game, are big enough and plentiful enough with the natural sleet wheat that you usually don't even have to get access to all of it. You still have plenty of food to go around. But, like I said, there's situations for everything in this game, so this is definitely possible. I'm just going to do a very quick walkthrough of what I would do with this build, so that you can get an idea. So if you wanted to replicate this in your own games, then sure. Because I don't know if I'll ever talk about this again. But the basics of this is that the sleet wheat requires a body temperature of -55 to 5 Celsius. This becomes a little bit of a problem with a lot of traditional builds because water has a very narrow range between 5 and 0 Celsius. And trying to cool that down with an aqua tuner can be really weird, because like sending it through the aqua tuner and getting it exactly within the right temperature can be kind of awkward. So I prefer, when I do a setup like this, to not use water cooling to keep something like this going. It's just to feed all the extra phosphorite that I have to my Wheezeworts, let them consume it, and create a very cold chamber down here that is submerged in hydrogen. I just have a shipping setup here that is going to be shipping in the phosphorite just into this container. Up here is just going to be shipping in dirt, because once you cultivate sleet wheat, you're going to require water and dirt here. You're going to require irrigation, water and dirt. So yeah, but the temperature that you need to keep is pretty low, definitely lower than it's going to be in your base. So I just have a simple water lock here. I put an extra door just to help hold temperature just a little bit better. Overpressurized both rooms, by the way, so this is pressurized to like 15 kilograms per tile. This is pressurized to about 7. I have some automation here just to make sure that the pressure is going to stay the same. And then the water, like I mentioned, you can just kind of feed it in the same temperature. The cooling mechanism to get this room cooled down is going to be a bunch of mechanized airlocks. And the mechanized airlocks can be connected via some automation, which is just going to check the temperature in here and say that if either sides of this are above 1 degree Celsius, I want these doors to open. So pretty straightforward automation here. I guess I'll just kind of hold here if you need it for a second. You can see that we're starting to verge on the point of the room being too warm. So if it's too warm, if it's too cold, it'll open up and it won't share the temperature with this room down here. This room down here is just going to keep making things cold as long as we're still getting phosphorite and as long as it doesn't get too cold. This will eventually get too cold to a point where it will stop working, but this mechanism here is what's going to assure that you have good temperature sharing. So yeah, pretty practical use, I would say, for if you need a sleet wheat farm in the base game for some reason. But this operates totally different in Spaced Out, and it's actually even better in Spaced Out. So let me show you one of those. Okay, here they are in Spaced Out, and this looks very different because we're using a new mechanic in this, which is radiation. In Spaced Out, Wheezeworts will emit radiation, and at a pretty significant amount. This is really good because a big part of the research tree requires Radbolt, basically Radbolt research. I don't even know what you really want to call it. But effectively, this is where you will get the yellow research from, this material study terminal, and it requires Radbolts in order to work. One of the cheapest ways to do this, and especially because, once again, there's going to be a lot of phosphorite on the map, is just to plant a couple of Wheezeworts next to your Radbolt generator, and whenever this needs more Radbolts, so just hooked up very simply like this, I'm going to allow an auto sweeper and a Radbolt generator to be turned on, basically. And then while this is running, this will generate Radbolts at a pretty high rate, and it will shoot the Radbolts through these reflectors and eventually into the material study terminal so that it can run. So, yeah, very, very practical way of doing this. And also the best part about this is these are just a self-cooling setup. So the other ways you would have to do it at this stage of the game, you would need cooling on top of this just to keep it under control. And it would require a good amount of power. But this, you really just need to power the Radbolt generator and nothing else. And you just need to feed the Wheezeworts. As long as you deny access from your duplicants of getting in here, if you don't need Radbolts, it will stop using the phosphorite because this will eventually run out in the farm tile. So yeah, I mean, just to see this full loop, I kind of want to see the Radbolt shoot over there. So should here in just a second. But that's the idea. As far as the positioning of this, you could move this down a little bit to be a little bit more effective. Or you could add a couple more if you want them to be faster, but this doesn't need to be overly quick, and it does get in there pretty quickly, so come on, I'm stalling so awkwardly. There we go, there's the shot. Straight in there, and then Harold's like, okay, now we can do the applied sciences research. So very practical way of using it throughout Spaced Out, and it can start pretty early in the game. So yeah, that's a really cool application. Those are the two basic applications for this, so there's not a whole lot more. You could kind of find your own builds to do this with, but let's just kind of go to the final verdict and see what we think about it. Okay, we're here at the report card, as we've seen before. Let's talk about all the different aspects of this and what we think. So first of all, when to use it, I would say early game. I usually define early game as before you have access to oil, so I guess take that for what it is, but definitely a lot earlier than some of the other technologies that we talked about with this. And really the only thing that you need is your shipping network up. And if you've watched any of my walkthroughs, the shipping network is something that I get pretty early on. About cycle 50, I would say, is when you first have access to it. Ease of use, I'd say moderate. It's not obvious, but I don't know. I was debating whether to put this one on moderate or easy. Somewhere in there, definitely not very difficult. Practicality, though, we put out some very practical use cases for it, especially in Spaced Out. So I would definitely rate this as a meal would on a scale of food. Final verdict, for Oxygen Not Included, the base game, I'm going to say it's okay. It's not usually something that I will make builds around, but I will just kind of leave it where it naturally occurs because it helps. But for Spaced Out, definitely amazing. And this is the first amazing rating I'm giving anything on this series. So yeah, if you're in Spaced Out, make use of it. It's very, very good. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with another video here really soon. Take care.